This is a video from back in 1967 of what the home in 2000 would look like. Little look at this video and hear what this guy has to say, shall we?
First century. This equipment here will allow him to carry on normal business activities without ever going to an office away from home. This console provides a summary of news relayed by satellite from all over the world.
So remember, this is 1967, and this is important if you're a thinking person, and everybody here every night of the white table is a thinking person. Then some things will be coming to mind as you watch this. All the way back in 1967, this is being aired, which means how many years earlier? 20 years earlier, that the wealthy, the intelligentsia, that they were aware of this at least 20 years earlier. So this is making its way to the public in 1967, about the year 2000. And he has, if it's a little bit difficult to see on your device, maybe you're watching on a cell phone, and then you this is a mighty small image. You can take a screen capture, zoom in on it. It's just a white guy from the 60s. He's in a house which is sparsely, it has a Spartan decor to it, we shall say. And there are a number of computer monitors, and it's kind of like me, actually. It's kind of like me. I'm surrounded by monitors. Thank God these don't put out the radiation that the old televisions used to put out.
Now, to get a newspaper copy for permanent reference, I just turn this button, and out it comes.
From satellites all around the world, the news will come right to a device that'll be available to you. Remember, again, to the public 20 years earlier, easily 20 years earlier. The intelligentsia knew, maybe longer, maybe 30 years earlier, maybe 40.
When I've finished catching up on the news, I might check the latest weather.
And take a look at it. Isn't it interesting? The news, it populated on the screen, on the monitor. If you couldn't see, I'll just tell you. But then he also printed it out to have something physical to hold, because that was, of course, the only way that they could understand getting news to read. Steps over to another monitor, and
this same screen can give me the latest report on the stocks I might own.
So one screen for numerous applications. Very important. Continue to think about this. It's almost over.
A telephone is this instrument here, a mock-up of a possible future telephone. This would be the mouthpiece. Now,
a microphone.
If I want to see the people I'm talking with,
you want to see them. You want to interact with them.
Turn the button, and there they are. Over here, as I work.
One of the things that is, I just want to jump in, is really important about this, is that there's a lesson, a parallel lesson about this sort of material when you come across it. And that is that all that we think is so recent is a consequence of our perspective from the lives that we have led. And we talk about this kind of thing all the time. People will say that, and it's important to repeat, because we forget, and you have new people show up all the time. But people will say, well, it got bad the last 5 years. It got bad in the last 3 years. It got bad back in the 2000s. It got bad. And really what they're saying is that's when they began to pay attention. These people are myopic, and their conclusions, then think for a moment about the kind of conclusions that they draw when they say, well, it got bad. The wokeism, or the whatever they want to call it, got bad 5 years ago. It got bad in the 2000s. Well, everything was good in the 80s. Everything was good. And then they have drawn a bunch of conclusions, and then they give prescriptions for how to remedy it. How could they be in the least bit correct? They don't even know when it started. So you think about like your devices, your phone, your et cetera, your computers, and this was known already to the intelligentsia by the 1940. They were already 100 years ago. 100 years ago.
On this screen, I can keep in touch with other rooms of the house through a closed-circuit television system. Anybody
thinking about Ring doorbell and everything so popular finally today?
With equipment like this in the home of the future, we may not have to go to work. The work would come to us.
Work will come to you. Be able to work right through your devices. Work will come to you. You'll be able to work right through your devices. This is for public consumption. How many years earlier? Again, this is the 5th time I'm saying it because it's the point that we're going to be making.
In the 21st century, it may be that no home will be complete without a computerized communications console.
Computerized communication console. And now that computerized communication console is this big. It's your cell phone. The rich, the oligarchs across Western civilization, these anti-white oligarchs knew that the tech, that the robots would be able to do everything in Western civilization. I want you to keep this in mind all the way back 40s, maybe 30s to whatever, maybe even 20s to whatever extent, to whatever tech they had available, creeping in, so that therefore that awareness, if it goes in this direction, it will be maybe in the 10s. They were already aware. The oligarchs of the rest of the West, anti-white as they have been for a very long time, were already aware. And so what now do you think about the importation of non-white peoples from planet Earth? What now do you think? Because of the labor, because they need them for labor. What now do you think? You're going to hear Eva talking in just a little bit about this great replacement, something of a concept we never use because it is psychological warfare. I mean, I can't believe I actually tweeted the other day about somebody used do-gooder, the meme pathogen, the anti-white concept, do-gooder. These are the tools of manipulation, psychological warfare, the tools of psychological warfare. When they write up there and they say, well, it's a replacement immigration or whatever, it's not to sustain their civilization. They know, and they have known for multiple generations, that they weren't going to need a population. They weren't going to need an ever-growing population. They weren't going to need their economy. Are you joking? That's monopoly money for these people. They print whatever they want. They don't need all of that. They don't need there isn't going to be a melting, a crumbling, a falling apart of Western civilization because there aren't enough featherless bipeds to walk the streets and fill up sewage tanks with their waste. They don't need these people. These people have always been and always will be, for the anti-white oligarchs, the way to white erase Western kind, ladies and gentlemen. I want you to take another look. I'm going to turn this video off right now. Take another look. For public consumption, they already knew. The computers and the robots in 1967. What else happened in the 60s when it came to the Immigration Act across Western civilization? Is anybody listening yet? Have you ever met anybody like the folks in this community that have absolutely nosebleed high IQs, but also courageous and brave and masculine? What else happened with suddenly the anti-white oligarchs across Western civilization began implementing changes in immigration, didn't they? Implementing changes in immigration to prevent white people coming in from other places and to bring in nothing but non-white people into the West. These United States specifically, isn't it interesting that they decided when they knew they weren't going to need people anymore, that they started bringing non-white people in, and under this argument, which I'm sure sounded really sort of dainty and delicate and totally acceptable back to the anti-white oligarchs in the 30s and the 40s and the 20s and the 50s when they were thinking about it, we'll just tell the population, we'll just tell this white population that we need all of these non-white. I want to ask you something. Do you think you have to be a non-white anti-white oligarch to conclude that? Do you really think you have to be? How many of you out there have ever felt a twinge of concern of competing with another white person who might be fabulously talented. How many of you? All of us, right? We have all felt that. Guess who also feels that way? White, anti-white oligarchs. They don't need a giant white population wherefrom geniuses might spring to displace them in their wealth, in their revenue, in their power. They don't need that. Oh no. Squalid, teeming brown masses, when they looked out from the 1930s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, and they looked out across these brown and black masses, yellow masses, all of these different races, and they looked out across the world and they said, boy, those populations look like they would be a lot easier to keep oppressed. I wouldn't have to worry about having to compete with them. My friends, you don't need anti-white, non-white oligarchs to have those non-white oligarchs to have those decisions bring in non-white people to wipe out the white population. You just have to have venal, monstrous, animal, white people filled with cupidity and wanting to have nothing in the form of competition welling up from underneath of them, ladies and gentlemen. If you've ever wondered, I mean, look back at all of these conservative conspiracy people, and they always do ignore the Jewish anti-white oligarchs when it comes to the conservatives. They always focus just on, and especially if they're an anti-white Jewish person who likes to talk about conspiracy theories, they love to ignore all of the Rothschilds, and instead they love to look out at the Vanderbilts and the Rockefellers and everything. They love to look at the white ones. We look at all of them. Anybody that's anti-white is a problem. They look at them and they say, look at how they destroyed competition. Everywhere you look, that's what the oligarchs did. They destroyed competition. So do you think they would just suffer the presence of hundreds of millions of talented white people from which geniuses could spring and displace and unseat them to supplant them as the wealthiest and the most powerful? They knew all along. They knew every step of the way. The only remedy to this is to become a people. That is the only remedy, so that every one of these anti-white oligarchs is surrounded, and each one of those people surrounded, and each one of those people surrounded by white people who are not going to brook anti-whiteism. That is the only way to set minefields about these villainous, venal, corruptible bastards who have done this to Western civilization. The only way, ladies and gentlemen, don't make me tell you again.